Welcome to Stream of Conscience, brought to you by Democracy for America, Fairfield County, where we believe that change is possible and you can make it happen. I'm your host, John Hartwell. Our guest today is Susan Bysiewicz, former Secretary of State in Connecticut and currently seeking the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate seat of Joe Lieberman, who is retiring. Susan was born and raised on a farm in Middletown, Connecticut, graduated from Yale College, and got her law degree from Duke. She first ran for state representative in 1992, where she won passage of laws banning gifts from lobbyists to legislators, making daycare safer, and ending drive-through mastectomies. In 1998, she was elected to serve as Connecticut's Secretary of the State, and in her 12 years in that job, helped modernize the state's election system and honored thousands of World War II veterans for their contributions to democracy. Susan, welcome to Stream of Conscience.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're really excited about this. What is it that's driving you to run for U.S. Senate?
Actually, the same thing that got me into public service and running for state representative in the first place, and that is my children's future. When I first ran for state representative, my daughter Ava was 5 months old.
Okay.
She was a year old when I got sworn in. And now I have 3 children. They're 16, 18, and 20. And I am very concerned about the large number of young people leaving Connecticut. We are losing more young people between 18 and 35 than any state in the country.
Yep.
And I am very much hoping to go to Washington to help make our state and our country a place where young people like my children can get a great job and have opportunities. And that's why I'm running for the Senate.
And how do we bring jobs back to Connecticut?
You know, this is, I think, a topic that we could probably spend a whole show talking about, but one really key thing I think we could start with is investment in infrastructure. So rebuilding our roads and bridges, which are crumbling in Connecticut.
Yep.
Many haven't been touched since Eisenhower built them in the first place. Also, we should be investing in mass transit. We are a small, compact state, yet we are much far behind our neighboring states like Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, that have a much better and more integrated transportation system. I also think we could create jobs by investing in renewable energy and requiring that utility companies institute clean energy contracts. So, for instance, if you're a homeowner and you've got solar panels on your home, that you can sell back excess solar power that you're not using back to the grid. And by the way, we can be creating jobs by making the grid smart and updating our ancient grid infrastructure. That's something else that would be a great benefit and the government should be encouraging. I also think we can help create jobs and increase job creation by reforming our small business administration. Because one of the things that I found as Secretary of the State working with small businesses is that there's too much paperwork associated with trying to get a small business loan. And I also think we should stabilize the housing market in our country through a securities transaction tax and providing home mortgage relief. And I hope we can have a chance to talk a little more about that.
I would like to do that. You mentioned a lot of opportunities for investment, especially in the crumbling infrastructure. And as a member of the Metro-North Rail Commuter Council, I certainly am aware of the problems that we have here in the main line.
You live it frequently.
Yes, we live it here every day in Fairfield County, and you know, I-95 and the Merritt are jammed. So we definitely need a better transportation system. The question is, in general, where would you find the money to do these investments? Because as you know, the federal debt is now $15, $16 trillion. I'm not even sure what the number is today, and is likely to be $20 trillion in not too many years in the future, which is fairly unsustainable.
And absolutely, and I think there are a couple of places to find the money. most immediately, if we bring our troops back from Afghanistan sooner than the president's timetable, and I'm a person who was opposed to both wars in Iraq and Afghanistan from the start, we could be using the $2 billion that we are spending each week to keep our young people in Afghanistan. We could be reinvesting that in our own country's transportation infrastructure, our human infrastructure, education, for example. Right. I am a person who very strongly believes that government should invest in infrastructure, that is an appropriate and important role for government. And what's interesting is this role reversal that we see as we look at Congress, because the Republican Party has always been a proponent of infrastructure investment. Of late, they are very much opposed to investing new federal money in infrastructure. So I actually have a proposal which is a creative way to think about this, and this is to use private capital, because corporations are sitting right now on, it's estimated by the Wall Street Journal, $2 trillion of cash that they're not investing in hiring people and building new facilities. Let's harness that private capital with the help of a private infrastructure bank and have public-private partnerships to invest in infrastructure. I think that's a creative way that hopefully Republicans could support.
Finding common ground right now with the Republican Party seems to be very difficult. And you know, President Obama came to office in 2009 saying that he was going to change the tone in Washington. George W. Bush said the same thing when he came into office in 2001. He was going to change the tone in Washington. How do you do that?
You know, I will say this, because there is tremendous dysfunction and gridlock in Washington, and many of the voters in this state have said, you know, Susan, why would you want to go to that body of 100 where nothing seems to be happening, and how could you make a difference?
And where one person can put a hold on everything.
Absolutely. And I would love to reform and change that cloture rule, number one.
Yes.
But I think more importantly, I think it's important as we look at who to send to Washington. That's what this Democratic primary is about, to look at the record that each person brings, because I think that I bring a record of making things happen even when it's difficult and even when there are powerful people and interests on the other side. And one example that I'd like to share is in the mid-1990s, as a new state representative, I went to Hartford and saw that lobbyists were setting the agenda at the Capitol.
Yes.
They were funding big parts of legislators' campaigns. They were wining and dining the most powerful committee chairs, giving them gifts, and all of that was legal.
Right.
And I made the audacious suggestion that we should ban the gifts, ban the wining and dining, and ban the contributions and bundling. And a lot of people laughed when I brought that up, and they said, oh, Susan, you know, that's a nice idea, but you're never going to make that happen.
You're so naive.
Right. And so I am a person who is empowered and motivated when people say something can't be done. And I built a strong base of public support, got most of the major editorial boards to support the idea, and reached across the aisle and got Republicans to join me as well. And we were able to pass the toughest gift ban and wining and dining ban in the country. And that laid the groundwork for banning the lobbyist contributions and bundling later. So I think that I could help reform Congress. And on my agenda also is banning all gifts, from lobbyists to Congress and senators and their staff.
And their staffs.
And their staffs. Also, I would ban lobbyist contributions and bundling, because hopefully we can talk about the tax code and what lobbyists have done to increase unfairness in our tax code. And I would also close the revolving door. So at least say that if you are a sitting senator or congressman, you have to wait for 5 years before you lobby your colleagues. We've done that in Connecticut. All of those things that may sound impossible, I've helped make happen in Connecticut. So that's why I feel so strongly that a committed, dedicated, hardworking person can make a difference in Washington. And that's why I'd like to go, because I think that my ideas would help hopefully break some of that gridlock that you're talking about.
Right. Let's look at some of the issues that you've talked about here. First one I want to talk about, you mentioned bringing home the troops from, of course, the combat troops are now home from Iraq. But there are some 15,000 contractors left behind, and they're making a lot of money, and they're being paid for by us, and some of them have semi-military, many of them have semi-military duties. And in Afghanistan, we still have 100,000 troops, and I'm not sure what the number is. President Obama says he's going to bring those all home by 2014. And already I'm seeing in the press that, well, the Afghan government doesn't really want to do that. And how do we get ourselves out of this war?
I think we have the best military in the world. And I know if we had the leadership in Washington, that we could use our military expertise to bring our troops back and bring our contractors home and our equipment home sooner than the president's deadline. And for every month that we move up, we bring back our troops sooner, we are saving not only 50 American lives, but we are saving close to $10 billion for every month that we move that timetable forward. And I hope that we do. I know we have the know-how and expertise to do it, and I would bring a commitment to Washington to be a voice for urging that the president bring our troops home and our contractors home quicker.
Now, the problem, of course, is that when you're in a body like the Senate, or in the Congress in general, House or the Senate, a bill works its way through, everybody gets their voice. Obviously the people who run the place get a larger voice than the people who are there at the beginning, and often you're faced with very difficult choices. And for example, the Military Authorization Act that just went through, the Defense Funding Act that was just passed in December, had some very difficult choices in there, and some people in this state in our congressional delegation decided to support that, and some people voted against it. And supporting it, you know, keeps you out of the line of fire for people to say you're not supporting the troops, because if you vote against the money for the troops, people say you're against the troops. What do you do in a situation like that when you're a freshman senator and you're faced with a bill that is not where you want it to be?
You can still bring forward bills, and there have been bills that have been put forward by very courageous legislators who think we should be out of the Middle East. And to me, we've accomplished our goal. We have brought Osama bin Laden to justice. We are done. We should bring our troops and our contractors home, especially when it is so costly for them to be there. And we have so many needs here at home that even Republican senators and congressmen are voicing these same concerns. And I will tell you, as I go around talking to voters all over the state, people in our state have as a strong priority, one of their top priorities is to bring our troops home, because they very much understand that it's not a partisan issue. They are tired of seeing our American resources supporting our troops there when we could be supporting our own country's future.
But faced with a kind of vote like the Military Authorization Act that just went through, would you have voted for it or against it?
I would always vote to support the troops, and I would also, though, fight hard and bring forward legislation to do whatever is necessary to bring our troops home quicker. And in fact, and I hope we have time to talk about it a little more, I have a plan to realign our military and close our military bases, many of our hundreds of bases that we have right now in Germany, because our military presence in Europe is still based on this ancient Cold War model.
Right.
And there's so much that we could do to be keeping our troops safe, but also making our military stronger and better equipped to fight the global terror threats that we face now.
One of the outgrowths of the war on terror, if you will accept that, I find it hard to deal with that phrase, but a lot of people use it.
Or global threats.
Global threats. One of the clear outcomes of the early 2000s were things that I believe impacted us and our freedoms here at home, like the Patriot Act, for example, like warrantless wiretapping that went on and it was subsequently approved by Congress. And
I'm so glad that you brought both of those issues up, the warrantless wiretapping and the Patriot Act, because I think these issues go to some fundamental differences between some of the candidates who are in the Democratic primary. I am a person who strongly believes that the Patriot Act should not have been reauthorized because I think that people's personal emails, people's personal information should not be trolled through by the government without a warrant. If the government has evidence that somebody may be engaging in criminal activity, then fine, get a warrant. And
we have a legal system.
Yes, we do.
We have judges in place. We have actually secret courts to look at these things where intelligence is involved and national security is involved. And to me, the idea of not going through that process is reprehensible. I can't understand what led people to do that.
That's right, and it really flies in the face of our fundamental support for civil rights and civil liberties, and ignores the rule of law. I absolutely agree. So, you know, one of my primary opponents has voted 3 times to reauthorize the Patriot Act, and I have a strong position against reauthorization, and he also voted to support warrantless wiretapping. Same idea.
And you would not have done that.
And I would not have.
Let's move to the financial sector because so much of the economic difficulties that this country finds itself in today was basically created by a Wall Street, in my opinion, run amok.
A Wall Street that was too cozy with our United States Congress.
Right, and I've noticed on your website some videos that put you down at Wall Street and talk about these issues, and I'd like you to hear, you know, where you would go. What should we do? Was Dodd-Frank enough? Is there more that's needed? What do we do here to bring this financial services industry under control?
I think that the financial collapse was caused by a fraud committed by Wall Street, and we've failed. Our leaders in Washington have failed to hold Wall Street accountable for what they've done. And I think it's very important to hold those Wall Street banks accountable for the tremendous harm that they've inflicted upon people in our state. We have 100,000 people without jobs as a result, and we have 100,000 people in our state who are underwater with their mortgages because of what Wall Street did. So here's my proposal to hold Wall Street accountable and make them pay for the harm that they did. I propose to impose a small securities transaction tax on the buying and selling of securities. It would make Wall Street pay for the damage, and at the same time, it would also slow down that high volume churning and trading and casino gambling almost that the banks engage in. And I propose to use the $150 billion that would raise in a year as assistance for homeowners who are underwater. And this is a staggering thing. You know, people wonder why the housing market is lagging and why our economy is still so stagnant. Well, consider this, that of the 55 million homeowners in this country, 15 million are underwater. So 15 million homeowners have mortgages that are higher than the actual value of their home.
Which is more than 25%. More than 1 out of every 4 homeowners owe more on their mortgages than their house is worth today. So even if they had a job opportunity in some other state, some other town nearby, and needed to move, they can't afford to sell their houses at a loss and move on. And so much of the history of this country has been people picking up, saying, I'm done with this here, I'm going somewhere else, because not only did people come from other countries here, people moved internally. And that has been the history of this country. And right now, everybody seems to be frozen in place because of the mortgage situation. We have to find a way to get the banks to take a write down or to provide money for people. Something's got to happen.
And my proposal goes farther than President Obama's proposal. He had a proposal with respect to relief for interest. I propose writing down the principal to match the actual value of the home. And my proposal would help the middle-class homeowners, not necessarily the people who own McMansions, but people who have modest homes that meet the FHA requirements, because it is bad for everyone when someone has to walk away from their home because they can't pay their mortgage. Their home falls into disrepair. It brings down housing prices in the neighborhood.
Right.
And until we get our housing market back on track, we're not going to have economic improvement. You know, you can walk in my neighborhood in Middletown and every 4 or 5 homes are for sale. Nothing is moving. The construction industry isn't vibrant, and it's a drag on everything.
So the Home Depots of the world are not selling goods, and people are not going in and renovating. It just goes throughout the entire economy.
Consumers don't have extra money to spend going out to dinner or whatever, and it makes it very, very difficult. And so that's why I really think that my proposal would not only make Wall Street pay for the damage that they caused, but also help our economy get back on track. And this is an idea that is not something that's new to our country. We had this tax in place from 1918 to 1966. Other European countries have it in place now.
The transaction tax.
That's right. And President Sarkozy and President Merkel are also looking at this right now. And the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury just endorsed this idea in Europe, too. It's not every day one of my policy ideas gets endorsed by the Pope.
One of the things that I believe drove the financial collapse was the way the tax system is set up to favor people who are making money off of money, especially the hedge fund people who are paying only 15% on carried interest rather than paying 35 or 36% that everyone else would have to pay if they were making the same amounts of money.
And I couldn't agree with you more, and I think we should reform our tax system, and let's start with that carried interest loophole that allows Mitt Romney and Warren Buffett to be paying 14% while everyone else is paying 35% plus. And I think that it is a tragedy that on March 28, 2010, when there was a real opportunity to close that loophole, that there were 34 Democratic congressmen that joined Republicans, and my opponent Chris Murphy was one, to keep that loophole open. And there's a real policy difference that we have. I would close the loophole, and I would let the Bush tax cuts expire for the wealthiest, and I would get rid of the subsidies to agribusiness, to oil companies. You know, they're gushing profits, and you know, everyday people are paying the brunt of it.
We've only got a couple of minutes left here. How's your campaign going? What do people do if they want to join up with you? You know,
our campaign is doing very, very well. It's going very well. We're so excited. We've been endorsed by 2,500 local and state elected officials and Democratic activists all over the state. We were recently endorsed by Emily's List, an organization that supports women running for federal office.
Helps them raise money.
Absolutely, helps them raise money. And we've been endorsed by more Democratic town committees than any of our opponents. We're very proud of that. And if people do want to volunteer, We would love it if they would go to susan4ct.com.
Yep.
If you want to check out our accountability plan to hold Wall Street accountable, look at susansplan.com. Send us an email, give us a call at 860.
Watch the videos.
Watch the videos, 860-343-1585, and we'd love to have your help.
Great. Well, Susan, thanks for coming in. Good luck with the campaign.
Thank you.
And keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in learning more about progressive political action in Fairfield County, please check out our Democracy for America group. We meet the first Wednesday of the month, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Silver Star Diner in Norwalk. We always welcome new members. Remember, change is possible, and you can make it happen. This has been Stream of Conscience, and I'm your host, John Hartwell. We hope to see you again soon.